Hello. This is Fire Walker on the Talking Stick Radio. I have today my brother, big brother Canupa. He is going to talk to us about Sundance, the sacred Sundance in the Lakota Nation, and we're going to talk a little bit about police brutality in the Native community out west in that area. We already know that it's a lot going on with law enforcement and people in general across the country, but what you don't hear about is what's happening in the Native communities. I just got into a discussion with someone, with some natives, some white people we had a colorful board of people we were talking with, and a lot of people are upset with black people, with Black Lives Matter and all the attention that they're getting with police brutality. Here's a response that I gave. Whether it's destructive or constructive, when someone murders a black person, whether it's destructive or constructive, they will get together, constructively or destructively, but they will get together and rally. Whatever happens out of that happens, and the media will cover it. CNN, ABC, CBS, all the major networks will cover it. So then my question becomes, are you mad at the ones who are rallying, or should you be mad at the one who is covering it, the media? Because then the Native brothers, and then you have some Caucasian families out there who are getting killed by police. You don't hear nothing about it on the news. None of these communities control the media, but the elite does, and they determine and dictate who they're going to cover. And what that's doing is causing a lot of strife and problems between a lot of different communities and making them mad at each other. But anyway, Canupa, if you want to go ahead and bring us up to date with what's going on.
Yeah, first off, I'd like to say a thank you to the Talking Stick Radio crew for allowing us to come back, and then at the same time, it's a blessing that, we have a radio station and a radio show that can bring and put indigenous issues out there before the world, and that way, they can get a better onsight and understanding of what's taking place here in, the Western Hemisphere. And first of all, this is Canupa Money with the Strong Heart Warrior Society coming at you from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in the state of South Dakota to give you a recent understanding of what's happening. A couple of days ago, we had a call from the families of concerned relatives on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation pertaining to a lot of issues that the police department, got away with cold-blooded murder. And we're talking about the tribal police and also the state police in the vicinity of Pennington County. And so over the past, years, there's numbers of strife that take place within the cities, because of the racial disparities. And the Native people make a majority of the population in the vicinity of Pennington County, better known as Rapid City. And so you could see that there is a large margin pertaining to what is happening here in Indian country, and it's less exposed through media because we're always having a media blackout. And at the same time, when it comes to death of indigenous people, we are overlooked, and the mainstream does not want to cover it unless it involves you more of a stronger virtue that we are attacking, the Caucasian race to better serve that mentality of, the unified code. And so today, that's the discrepancy that the tribal government and the State's Department, through their police. Remember, America has become a police state, and that's one of the things that is very detrimental to the survival of many people that are being, escorted off and placed into these colonial prison camps known as, private sectors through, the complexity of having people locked up and, forced to, mingle with themselves to determine if they have credibility to be released on early parole and whatnot after they serve their time. And a lot of times they're all sent to prison on charges against, humanity. In other words, in reality, these are all false, accusations that the system perpetuates to utilize its power of authority to take away from you, the citizen, and send your loved ones into an atmosphere that makes them continuously come out into society and repeat the same thing that got them in there in the first place, irregardless if it was alcohol or drug related. A lot of times, the majority of them brothers and sisters that are locked up have no business of having that type of, penalty or exposure through the justice system being launched upon them because of what's taken place. And I talked directly about how the state of South Dakota and the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is using that type of mentality to send our people off to the federal institutions and continuously to lock up our children from the age capacity of 21 to 13. We all know that the federal courts have ruled in our favor to return our children, and to this day, not one child has returned home.
Now, that's amazing. How can that be? How can that? Please explain to us. How can that be? How could they rule in? You said ruled in your favor, but none of the children were returned home. How could that be?
Well, here's the circumstance, okay? It's like spirituality, okay? Spirituality has a supremacy clause. When we say we're praying for our children in Lakota are symbolically represented, and they have a name, Wakanja. Wakanja is a short term for people that have a value of sacredivity. Sacredivity is the sacredness that they are born and bred with before they become adults and reach the age capacity of 13. So when they're still a Wakanja, that sacred attire still applies to them. So here's why America and the states illegally taking our children, placing them in non-native foster care families, and stripping them of their traditional, customary law of their life, which is the way of living out in the wilderness. These children are very sacred. As we all know it, to this God-forsaken day in 2015, children can see the afterlife. And, there's stories of our children where at the age capacity of 1 year old, talking like adults because the spirits that they've encountered made them talk about what's happening in the oral environment. So when alcohol and drugs and different type of situations that arise in Indian country, and I look back to the time when we took over the hamlet of Wounded Knee, the sacred massacre site that Bigfoot and his people perished at the Hotchkiss guns and cannons at the 7th Cavalry's discretion in 1890, we took over that hamlet to address the abuse of, DSS and CPS and tribal governments for the illegal bigotry by discriminating that power of authority and stripping our people and placing them off into non-native foster care families, which they're being deprived of their traditional identities. And so we took up arms against the federal government to attack that problem. Lo and behold, this was back in 1973 when the late Russell Means led us into Wounded Knee. And here we are in 2015 still fighting the same thing, and nothing has returned. And we have a spiritual concept that goes with that. They say in Lakota, "Wa kankile lila wa kampi, cha etaha tuat hoksa, na washichu kilena tima aicha ya uhanta, shicha walakokte, wa kankile na tueni top ni olakota ke hena topi, na mila hanska kilena dagani ikiwa japne." It makes sense, and that's true. This way of life that's sacred to us doesn't belong to the white man. It belongs to indigenous people, and many others of color have their traditional practice that they still live by. So according to that method, our spirituality is intact, so that should tell the rest of white America that illegally take these kids, that these customary practices should still be upheld wherever they may reside when they remove these children. Unfortunately, the state of South Dakota has not ever made that attempt. Not even had they made that attempt to return them, they violated again human rights laws. And so just because in the early part of the year, in 2015, the federal courts ruled in our favor, again, ladies and gentlemen, not one child has returned.
Are you able to use the accomplishments from the UN meeting to address the children and the murders and things that's going on out in Lakota country to start changing policies?
Yes, one of the things that when I went out to the United Nations with the group of people that came with us, my sister Anna and, my son and, many others that were in participation with that, one of the things that I want people to understand, and listening audience, I was given the opportunity to come back again in October. So aside from that, I'm looking at that avenue more openly to take part with getting more nations to get involved. And thanks to Red Chief of the Alabama Nation Creek people from down in Alabama country, from the Tuskegee area, he was one of them to accompany us. And unfortunately, something happened with him because in involvement with the Lakota Nation and the Strongheart Warrior Society. So we are working on that avenue very close with him and his people. And it was an honor to meet some of his elders and tribal members in the state of Alabama. I hate that crass term when people call it Alabama. It's Alabama. It's people that dwell within the river basin. That's what that means. It's Algonquin. But a lot of the American people take it for granted. And that's one of the things that happens today. So when the Lakota people seeks, the human rights and sovereignty acknowledgement at the UN's level, you can see that there is a situation that needs to be addressed. And we just learned that in the upcoming meeting in October, that we are going to go before the cabinet workers through the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, and his cabinet workers to readdress and continue to put our effort where we can file genocide complaints against the state of South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, and Michigan, and Alabama. I'm sick and tired of our people being left out in left field and not having that opportunity to have their voice and discrepancies be heard before the nation's world leaders. And so the Strongheart Warrior Society and the Free Independent Lakota Nation are moving to substantiate these avenues to help our other nations. Not only that, we also represented the Chiricahua Apache because you know this, that they're still having a standoff with some of the people within their region. And it says that a majority of our people, they want to address world nations. But again, America has always practiced and perfected colonial policies to neutralize their rights and way to be heard. So they circumvent the issue. And lo and behold, here's indigenous people that have the independent right to address the world nations about the continuous epidemics and genocidal upbrings that are being targeted at them at the discretion of white America and the states. Remember, if we don't make an attempt to hold America accountable for all its racial bigotry, when they conspire to commit murder, ladies and gentlemen, you're to blame because you've done nothing to step up and combat this problem and fight the system for their destruction of neutralizing and murdering our people. Scores and scores of our people are being removed from home, removed from their private land. Corporations are coming in and destroying it like a water drop inside of, a little puddle that creates shock waves throughout the ceiling of the water. And so this is what we're talking. I'm very upset that every time we try to take a serious matter and a look into the situation, we're always met by resistance. And now remember, Canupa just came from an occupation at the beginning of July, which I was later arrested at the discretion of the Pendleton County Sheriff's Department on crimes that didn't occur. There was nothing for them to have the validity to arrest me, but they arrested me anyway. And so this is what really upset me, and I decided to congregate with the majority of my people, and I had enough of dealing with this, colonial power. And so the only way that we can create a supremacy clause to attack this problem, we got to take on that responsibility and file genocide complaints against the state and the federal government itself, because their power of control. Remember what Donald Trump said. Donald Trump said this in recent, editorial columns, where he was talking about if he was ever to become a seated president of a country that doesn't belong to him, the first thing he was going to do was deport my Mexica brothers and sisters back to Mexico. Well, if they weren't born and bred in my country, well, first of all, Mr. Trump and them need to go home too, because he wasn't born and bred in here. All of them people are all illegal. Since the arrival of the first colonists in 1492, they have never, ever had paper that gave them the validity to be recognized in a country that already had its inhabitants. And I'm speaking to the rest of the white America, because you're always practicing your own perfection, thinking that you are the honest people of this country, when in fact you are nothing but racist white liars, and you continue to resurface your bigotry by lying to the rest of the world. And social media does not want to cover that. The only time they want to cover it is when it becomes a matter of somebody's vote to get the popular individual elected. And so that itself is a denial of free speech. When you say people that are born in my country, known as the island here or Turtle Island, that don't have paperwork that shows their credibility of this country, they must be deported. Well, white America, you need to be deported too, and the rest of your children. Back to you, little brother.
Yes, sir. John McCain is also making an ass out of himself, saying some crazy things. Ted Cruz. There's a lot of politicians who are really being not smart, really being stupid with some of the things that they're saying pertaining to Native people in this country. There's something that I hear that's always funny to me. If you live here, you need to speak English. I mean, have you heard that before?
Well, I'll put it in this context. English is a language that is second coming. In reality, you Americans need to speak, indigenous language if you're going to be recognized in my own country. First of all, we still have it. We never, ever had to retrace it across the water. Our language is born and bred in this country. And God damn it, we First Nations people are going to die in our own country. And that speaks for itself. No white man can impose a second language upon people that already had theirs first. Lakota was my first education. Mexica was my first education. And so was Cheyenne. They were all my first education. And secondary was English. And because English language has become, since the predominant culture had invaded different areas, they use that type of, adversarial behavior to uncensor the realities that don't fit the criteria of how most people, adapt their own, language to it. Remember, if anybody really wants to look at a traditional language-speaking person or, spiritual being, take a look at our four-legged. They're the only ones still hanging on to their language, and not once have they deprived the two-legged of accepting their own by resistance or enforcement. That all came about the Holy Roman Catholic version of way of life and religion to neutralize people's freedom to transfer them into the type of mentality that you have. When you claim yourself as an American, you are a damn fool.
What do you think about the Manifest Destiny and the Pope apologizing for that? Have you seen, I'm sure that you're aware that he apologized for the Manifest Destiny and going around and claiming land in the name of the church. Has him apologizing done anything for indigenous people?
No, it hasn't. And I will say this because I'm a very opinionated man. First of all, here's the Catholic Cathedral's biggest, religious, scepter You can't call him a religious king or a person in that type of criteria. You can call him a scepter, because a scepter is what you use to make people rise in the authority of religion. And somebody can tell me if I'm lying. If they can call in, I'll be answering that call. The reason why I call him a person as a scepter, because the religious, remember, when Rome set out to conquer the world, they never gave an ultimatum. And they never always tell, a people what their normal behavior is going to be. They force this religion upon people. Because if you do the math and you go back to when Rome set out to conquer the world, and when they try to neutralize children and turn them into zombies and create that type of mass, manifest a destiny by destroying children, when a child is removed from his mother at the age capacity of 6 or 7, that child is vulnerable to destruction and being manipulated into spiritual, acceptance at a brutal attire. So when you use a scepter to neutralize that child's right to his own free will of who he is as a human being, to this God-forsaken day, that Holy Roman Catholic version of education, it still goes on in our schools. Every one of these other nations have applied and adapted that Holy Roman education to their own child's upbringing. I don't care if it's Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, even the Indian people, we indigenous people. We are all marching around to a bell like Pavlov's dogs. That's sad. That's inhuman. Our children are supposed to be brought up in your own home where they can learn the basic human relationship with each other. But when you put them in the schools in a parochial teaching, that's fucking impossible. You'll kill them. So they could never, ever work together as a relationship of understanding who they are as a free being and as a free person. Thanks to you, the Holy Roman Catholic version of religion education, you're to blame. And you trying to apologize? That's not enough. The papal bull that gives its credibility to the indoctrination of discovery, how this whole country that belongs to First Nations people, you use your religion. Remember, the Queen of Spain said, if they cannot convert, kill them. Remember what you did to the young people in these nations that lived out in the East Coast, from Maine to Florida, the Seminole, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Yamasee, the Cherokee, the Creek. All of these Western bands and Eastern bands had faced that brutal enforcement at the hands of religion. And the Holy Roman Catholic Church and the Pope and them are all responsible for that. Apologizing ain't enough. I'd like to hear America itself apologize for all its wrongs that had not only done to indigenous people, but to our Africans, Hispanics, and Asians, and even their poor white people. Then and only then can the healing begin. But until then, I have no remorse for what the Pope says or the white Americans say in this form of accepting our apology. No, I can't. If you can, man, pack up, get on your planes and boats and go home, then we'll talk about reconciliation. But until then, I can't agree with you. Don't apologize for something I can't take. Remember, when you remove a people from the forest, the people of the forest become unknown. And what becomes unknown, you want to destroy. That's what's still ingrained in the Christian mentality, even in the Catholic mentality, and it still goes on in the American mentality. Remember, America is the original public enemy. When are people going to really wake up and see that's the blame? Corporations are destroying other people's vast way of living in different countries. But you will never hear anybody or even the public cry out about what's happening at the discretion of this white man.
Canupa, let me ask you, you said that you would love to hear America apologize. Did President Obama apologize on behalf of America?
I'm gonna put it in this context. President Obama made a couple of understandings that did not meet that criteria. He's not to blame. The white man has to blame. Okay? He has to be the one to blame. He has to apologize. Barack Obama has no setting to set that for them. That's not his job. His job is to help people. Help people address and pay attention to what's going on in America, if there's such a thing. Because if you look at the incarceration rate of people of color being locked up, not only should apology be reconciled, we should have a national day of release, okay? At one time on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, my late grandfather, Roy Stanislaus Martin, and the late Hobart Keith, which was a tribal judge, and also the late Matthew Eaglehart, these three men got together every year if the jail was crowded with indigenous people. On Little Bighorn Day, they were released. Released, free, drop charges and everything, okay? They were released to go home and reunite their families. And Grandpa and these two judges has told them, you got a whole year to comply with this. If we see you back within this year, you're going to start your sentence all over. That was an honorable thing. But that happened when indigenous people had the power to recognize their victories of what they have done when they counted coup against the American soldiers that were killing and raping our innocent women and children. And so today, you'll never see anybody talking about all the great leaders and honoring them and having national holidays and statues of them put everywhere. The state of South Dakota has a town of Rapid City. And if you come downtown, you see all these bronze figures. These are all famous Indian killers. So why are we honoring them? Countless amounts of tourists come into my town, and they're still praising dead people. Let him die. Leave him alone. Don't be remembered about a killer. Let him sleep now. Quit reminding him that he paved the way for white America to have a unique country. Bullshit. That's a big lie when you continue to allow the devil to still live again in the year 2015. And many others have done this to others. Hitler's one of them. You still want to remind of him. Hey, let him die. Quit reminding yourselves of that stuff. Come on, let's look at the positive deeds that go on in this country that people have successfully done. Let's honor them and the things that the struggling people are still living by. Let's honor them. Let's have a national holiday for everybody. I'd love to say this on national airwaves. You know, the African people are getting ready to start their Million Man March again. Well, I would like to have people contact me, area code 605-517-1547, and let's contemplate and create a strategy to have a million family gathering in Washington, D.C. and before the United Nations. And I'll tell you why. Because at the end of this conversation and radio show, I'll bet you 10 to 1 we can find solutions to eliminate this vast problem that's going on in our own country and in our own backyard. If we could create that type of togetherness and promote it more strongly and put all our differences aside and start thinking like families, we can destroy this problem that is killing us. And 10 to 1, that's how you make white America really own up to that forgiveness that it's supposed to be talking about. And I want people to really pay attention to that, because if we can formulate that, then and only then we can create our own healing process to save the rest of the children that are coming, that don't need to be subjugated to this colonial abuse at the imperial lifestyle. You know it, and I know it. And that's how you relinquish the captivity of the yoke of slavery and reinstitute the belief system in your freedom, and that's how independence can administer your sovereignty to save a nation from dying. Back to you, little brother.
Powerful words, powerful is all I have to say. Well, my brother, we are at the end of the show. I want to give you last words before we depart here. Anything else that you want to leave on the listeners' ears?
Yes, I want the listeners to contact me. Again, it's 605-517-1547. I'm gradually building a consciousness and a campaign to get many other indigenous nations on board with, our return to the United Nations to present all our cases before them. And everyone, contact me. I don't care if you're Yamasee, Apache, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Crow, Cheyenne, Arapaho, all the nations, the Navajo, all the nations in my country that have indigenous, discrepancies at the hands of the state and federal government. Contact me. The stronger the campaign and the large amount of gatherers that attend this meeting, you can help me produce this world gathering. Remember, if we create 1 million family gathering before Washington, D.C. and the United Nations, we can solve a problem. We can also create a better opportunity to have administering something that can be preventable instead of killing our people. Every second, every moment, every minute, every hour, there's somebody of color dying. And we, the poor people, are paying for it through our grieving, through our crying and pain. And once again, thanks to Talking Stick Radio for allowing us to come on. My blessing go out to all of you. Chief Shakur of the Yamasee Nation, hey, I look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks. I'll be heading that way to a gathering down in your neck of the woods. So hopefully we can touch base. And you tell your mom and them guys, we love you guys. Red Storm, Jerry, all you people that supported us, my grandma Josette, Richard, many others, my little sister out in California, Avita Lopez, Beverly Red Moon, all you guys that helped us go out to the UN, my brother Paul Leon and his wife, and many others that I may have forgotten that gave us refuge when we got to the United Nations to hold this meeting on July 31st. I thank all of you for a job well done, and I look for all of you to participate in our second round when we go before the United Nations in October. And little brother, thank you for allowing us to come back on the air. I look forward to another gathering of this understanding and an update of what's happening in Indian country. Let's really put America, in a place where they need to be and stop law enforcement continuously from killing our people. Much love to all you listeners. Okay, thank you.
Welcome. All right, until the next time, this is Fire Walker on the Talking Stick Radio, the Fire Walker Show. Thank you, Big Brother Canupa. We'll see you the next time. Out.